There you go.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep, what's happening?
Technology, right? Gotta love it. Okay, so the question was, what experiences, memories, or feelings have the current issues that are going on in our climate today triggered for you, specifically the video of George Floyd's interaction with the police that led to his death?
I'll go first. That's all right. I'm a child of the 60s. Civil rights, marches, riots after Martin Luther King died, military coming in to shut down the city because of the riots. And that triggered me, with George Floyd and seeing what was happening to him and what came after it, with the protests and the marches and the anger, because this is something that I have lived with for 72 years of my life that I have been on this earth, seeing how our people have been seen less than human, not have the second rights as others, being treated by the police like they're criminals even before they were found guilty on anything. The stop and frisk, before we even knew the name stop and frisk, our people were being racially profiled, not just the men, but women and our children also. The fact that we had to, I had to tell my sons what they needed to do if they were stopped by the police. And the fact that I feared and I could not go to sleep unless my sons came home, because I remember that when we were under curfew in Kansas City, Missouri, because of the race riots after Martin Luther King, my brother was brought home by National Guardsmen because they said he violated curfew, and that was very stressful and scary, but not just me, but especially for my mother. So there's a lot of triggers that have happened, during this era and during the George Floyd and the Sandra Bland's and the Breonna Taylors that have triggered a lot of sad memories as far as, as far as I'm concerned.
Anyone else?
I'd like to speak on part of what Ms. Mary Dean said. I remember back in the 60s, she was talking about race riots and everything, and there was a lot of tension, like on 13th and Hydraulic, and I just remember police came and told everybody to disperse, and so I was walking away, and I wasn't walking fast enough for the police, and I heard him tell his dog, well, he's kind of slow, bite him in the butt, but he used another word. So the dog bit me around the ankle, and naturally I sped up, and just looking at the footage of the George Floyd interaction with the police, it triggered anger in me, because I figured if people are watching this policeman with his knee on his neck, something should have been done. And I was thinking, I said, if I was in that situation, or if I saw that, I would have risked, being beaten or whatever, but just to get the man off his neck, perhaps save his life. So these are the memories that really, this really triggered in my mind. Thank you.
I'll add a couple of comments. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I had those same feelings, and my feelings were all of the activity that took place on 21st Street 21st Street was a huge place, and a huge area where some of our riots took place. But then I also asked my husband about his feelings and his thoughts about what was going on during this summer and the turmoil that we had. And he's from the South, so he remembers a different situation. He remembers being beaten and running home to get away from whether it's the Klan or whether it's from other people that felt that they had a right or that they had a privilege to taunt our young Black people in the South. So his remembrance of what is going on now brought back memories of the South during the 60s and the late 50s. And so a totally different feeling, a different way of seeing things, but the same thing going on eventually. So that's kind of the feeling that he has.
Thank you, Woman. Pastor Barlow, really quickly, you kind of mentioned something that I think has played very well into our current. And you said, knee on his neck. And you were talking about George Floyd. But if you kind of listen to Tarkin during some of the services for George Floyd, he said Blacks have always had their knees, whites have always had their knees on Blacks' necks. Not particularly a physical knee, but in other instances, by law, by health care. Can you kind of expand on that a little bit, kind of what you've seen over the years of your life, knee on the neck?
Yes, down through the years I've seen like racism, and it's like putting the Black man down, you know, not only physically but mentally and spiritually. And I think it's because they think we're ignorant or unlearned or whatever. And this is like, it gives them a cause for this. But they are, they're wrong.
And Hakeem, as you ask that question, I see the knee on his neck, but I also see the officer with his hand in his pocket, as if I can do this and nobody can stop me. And so for me, it was the knee on the neck, but it was also the audacity of him to have his hand in his pocket as he was doing so. That really, really hurt me. And as we talk about feelings, I think a long time ago it was a little bit different, even as we look at things now, and that's because of the cameras and everything being shown to us at that time. We could have heard about it, but now we see these things that are going on, and I think that is one of the things that has captured people's attention, and that's because they could physically see what was going on in the community and to people. Because of George Floyd, a counterfeit $20 bill, they saw what happened in live stream, and I think that makes a huge difference too.
Yes, Akeem, I'd like to add to that too. I guess what really triggers me and kind of makes me sad and angry at the same time is that Black people have seen a George Floyd all our lives. This is just not something that's new to us. This is something that has been part of our lives forever. Even though we've had our voting rights enacted a little over 60 years ago, look what's happening now. I mean, there's so many triggers that have woken up, not us, but I guess whites and others that have not had to go through this, because we have been saying this forever and ever and ever about what's been happening to Blacks in America. And now because they've seen an officer of the law for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, put his knee on the neck of a black man, and he, in the end, was crying for his mother. How many black men and black women have cried for their mothers when they have been assaulted by a police officer? So we've been dealing with this all our lives. And I don't think we should have to continue to educate people about what's been going on with us for all our lives. It's time for other people to step up and educate themselves.
They saw it, Mary. We all saw it.
Yeah. Ms. Mary, I really appreciate that. And this conversation obviously can take a lot of different turns, and I know we've got some questions that I absolutely want to get to, but it's just so thought-provoking, right? And so once you start talking, you kind of come up with other things and other questions. And Ms. Mary, you kind of mentioned it not being new, and I think that's what a lot of people maybe don't understand, is that just because you see it today doesn't mean that it hasn't happened in the past. One quick question, in your opinion, and I think we're going to ask some of these questions later on, but not being new, so how do we really stop from seeing these types of images on TV, reading these types of reports of black people being oppressed in America? What would you say is a way to kind of move forward in our own society?
All that we've got to change. Those very laws that claim that we're equal, we're not equal. There's two justice systems, one for whites and one for blacks. That's always been and always will happen until we get people in office that are willing to understand that if we say that the justice system is blind and equal, then that's who we need to have represent us, and that's the only way that we're going to get the laws changed about police reform. We got to change laws and change the hearts of the people. I mean, I don't think we can do it anymore. They have to do it.
Yeah.
We have our other panelist, Ms. Martinez, who's had her hand up for a minute here. Go ahead, Ms. Martinez. Welcome.
I just wanted to apologize for being late. I couldn't get on with my phone. I ran out of the Wichita State Community, village, whatever that's supposed to be. I'm a researcher in the area of media psychology, and there's so much out there now that people have to face or see, and then also people using it, to really not do so well in terms of the images that we see. But in this particular instance with the knee piece and George Floyd, what has happened is you have that actual visual in the mind of anybody who saw it became what is known as an imprint. That imprint will stay with them forever.
I can't hear. Can anybody else?
Ms. Martinez, your sound has gone out.
Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll get her back. Let's go ahead and move on. Next question. What conversations about race, privilege, differences, or the messages about racism taught in childhood and later in life are having today that we should be having?
Well, I think for one thing, we have to talk to our young black males. We have to start at an early age of helping them to understand that there could be different situations for them as opposed to some of their friends. And so having two sons, that's the kind of conversation we had to learn to do. Hands on the wheel if you're stopped. Don't say this, don't do that. It's sad that we have to have those conversations, but we must. But we should also be able to start having those hard conversations with the adults of today. Yes, in many cases there are difficult conversations, but we still have to overcome those differences. You know, our kindergartners and our young kids don't see a difference. They can play and play and play, and they don't understand the difference. They are taught the difference. They are taught the difference. And that is why we teach our young men who are stopped and who are violated the most, but we also have to educate our young kids, and we as adults, whether we are the Generation Z or the millennials or the baby boomers, we still have to continue that conversation, even though it's a hard conversation to have. We've got to start to learn to talk about race.
You know, I like to piggyback off of that, LaVonta. We have, in our lifetime, that's what we have done. We have taught our children what they needed to do, how they need to act when they go out, and all of that. I think it's tiring. You know, I have great-grandkids now, great-grandsons, grandsons, 2 sons, and they're going to have to teach their kids the same thing. Why do we, in a country as this, a free country supposedly, that we, black people, have to continue to teach our children how to behave, our children how to act when they're stopped? Whites are not doing that. They don't have to do that. I don't believe Hispanics have to do it as much as black people have to do it. You know, in the Constitution, it says that we're considered 3/5 of a human. We're not even considered human. That Constitution is not written for us at all. And so it's unfortunate. The conversations that we need to have are the conversations with our white allies. And those allies need to step forward and have conversations with their allies. We are human. We bleed like they do. We love our families like they do. And black women are the most educated women in this country. So they can't say that we're undereducated and that we don't know how to speak, because we have been living in their world for an awfully long time. We have learned their ways. So it's time for them to learn about us.
Are others able to speak? I'm sorry, I just came in this meeting. Are others able to dialogue right now?
So, Jaquan, we're going to actually have a question at the end. So right now we're going through a series of questions for the panelists, and at the end, write your questions down. You can also write them in the chat, and then Ms. Dorsey will ask those questions of the panelists at the end. So we'll definitely folks that are on the line.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, because for a minute I couldn't even hear you guys.
We're glad to have you back. Did you want to kind of complete your thought?
Yeah. So I don't know what you heard, but anyway, when you look at it from a psychological standpoint, that imprint that exists for anybody that kept watching that can have 2 effects. One, if you have any compassion and humanity for other human beings, that was hard to watch. You are now in a grieving process, and that grieving still showed up in many kinds of different ways and protests. It didn't matter what color you are. If you're a humane person who has a conscience, who believes in compassion, that had an overwhelming effect on you. On the other side of this, if you already existed with no love, bias, racist, supremacist, no compassion for human beings that don't look like you, that was more of a fear, let me brace down and protect who they are against. Good. There's another black one gone. So you have lots of different emotions going on, and that's how that's how the whole process began to create what we saw as a different dynamic and turns up. And I also want to emphasize, and I'm going to continue to talk about this, and that is that our early literature folks brought up this concept called white gaze. And that is, overall, a phenomenon that basically said, Toni Morrison talked about it quite a bit in many of her interviews when she was asked, why you don't have white people's stories in your book? And she said, why do I have to? Why do I have to include that? Is that part of, and it was like this whole literary review perspective that was missing, according to publications, that was missing in many of her books. But white gaze still exists today. And when you look at the media, you look at the reporting, you look at the videos and so forth, you see a different interpretation.
I think we're losing her.
I think, can I just jump in right there? You know, I think of two people, and Mary, you were right on just a while ago. Tamar Rice, who was playing with a toy gun and ended up losing his life. You have Trayvon Martin, who went to the store in a hoodie to pick up a package of Skittles. You know, what are young people learning from that? Our kids used to play with guns all the time. Why all of a sudden now do you shoot a black child playing with a gun? I used to be able to walk down the street with a package of Skittles and I could put a hood over my head. Now the kids sometimes think about those things. We shouldn't have to. We shouldn't have to change the way we live because we are fearful that something can happen to us. So those are some of the things that I think of. And I know, Pastor Barlow, you had your hand up as well. I'm sorry.
I was going to talk on the second question about what conversations about race, privilege, differences. And I thought about when I was getting ready to go to boot camp in the Navy, my grandmother pulled me aside and told me about being careful, because she knew I was kind of hot-headed, about differences that I would run into. And I remember I was taking a shower and I was all soaked up. And this guy, you know, I remember it vividly. You know, he was saying, "Little Barlow, he's trying to be white," you know. And so I didn't want to get mad. And so afterwards, I pulled him to the side and I told him, I said, "Hey, I'm from Kansas and I don't tolerate that. You know, I don't appreciate what you said, especially in front of, you know, the rest of the guys in there." And so he looked at me and said, "Hey, I apologize." So everything was cool. And I remember that because my grandmother was very, very adamant about teaching me the differences that people had, you know, concerning black people. And so, and I think my uncle, he'd been in the Air Force, and I think he talked to her about some of the problems that he had. So she just passed it on down to me, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Pastor Barlow. I won't hold it against you that you were in the Navy. I was in the Army, so. Okay. Next question. What are your thoughts on the Black Lives Matter movement? Scott.
Black Lives Matter. I so support Black Lives Matter because unless unless Black Lives Matter, all lives don't matter. I'm just sorry, you know, people come up with this all lives matter and all of that. No. You know, with George Floyd and Sandra Bland and Breonna Taylor, it's just it brought up another memory for me when I used to have to go to the country, Moscow, Tennessee. Every year we had to go down there to visit our grandmother and grandfather. Every year, rural part of the county, they didn't drive. They had a wagon everywhere we had to go. We had to go on a wagon and a horse, church, everything, and no indoor facilities, outhouse. We had to go to the fields with my grandmother at 5 o'clock in the morning and work until sun went down. And when we went to town to get supplies, my grandmother and grandfather, even if we were on the sidewalk and a white person came toward us, even as a child, we had to get off the sidewalk to let them pass. And as a city girl, we had issues in Kansas City, Missouri, but, we didn't have to do all that. And I couldn't understand that. And I asked my grandmother when she would say, y'all and gnome and all of that to white folks. And I'm like, Grandma, why you got to say all of that? And she said, honey, that's how it is down here. And it was sad. So we have been going through a whole lot of stuff, in our lives ever since our people landed on this shore in the Americas to build this country. And our people have still not been given the credit so needed and due to them for building up a country. We have not been given, our people weren't given their 40 acres and a mule that was promised by Abraham Lincoln. But because of his assassination, that next president that came in said, no, you're not going to get it. And because blacks were so-called freed, then they created this police patrol that has the same mentality then they have now. So our people have been suffering for a long time, and yes, black lives do matter.
And I agree with you, Mary, and I also say that the baby boomers had their way of getting their message across. And so right now, the millennial and the Generation Z need to make sure that they understand what their marching orders are as they move forward. And so what you are seeing right now are the millennials and the Gen Z making a difference and calling theirs something different. Many of them may be a part of the NAACP, but they had their own language, and it is Black Lives Matter. I agree with that younger group because it's their turn. We have been passing the baton, and that baton is now going to the Black Lives Matter. John Lewis is one of those who said it's their turn. The younger generations have to understand how to start moving their feelings forward. So I definitely agree with what they're doing. And I think that we have to understand when we hear them say, this is the way we want to do it. I think that there is still the nonviolence part in there. And so I think that this is just a younger generation saying, thank you, baby boomers. It's our turn. We got this. And I agree with them.
Yeah.
Councilwoman, go ahead. Ms. Martinez.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Black Lives Matter is an evolution in its own time, and it had to be different because they are dealing with an extension of what has lasted forever in terms of the law. And until the laws change and people's attitudes change, and I'll tell you what, for me, has been a real way to listen to the others. When they talk about, if anybody that I know who is Caucasian, European, or any other race, say to me, I don't understand Black Lives Matter, and so therefore why don't y'all about All Lives Matter? That person no longer has a conversation with me because I know right there, and I identify. And again, I'm gonna go back to.
Okay, looks like we lost you again, Ms. Martinez. We lost your audio. You can hear us. Okay.
Ms. Martinez, you might try taking the video off, and that may help with the bandwidth. So you might turn your video off and see if that helps us with being able to hear your audio.
I was going to go somewhere with Councilwoman Williams' statement about Black Lives Matter. Many have tried to tie Antifa to Black Lives Matter. I want to get the thoughts from the panel on that, whether Antifa is a part of Black Lives Matter, if it's a totally separate thing. I want to get your thoughts on that.
Antifa is an ideology. It is not part of Black Lives Matter. And people need to stop listening to those talking points to discredit Black Lives Matter because that is not who they are and who that movement is. So I agree with what LaVonta said when she said that the younger generation, this is their time, and this is how they're doing it. And one thing I can say about the younger generation that we didn't do when we were doing the civil rights movement, we were persistent, but these young people are really persistent and consistent about what it is their message is all about. They're not gonna do what the elders did, even though we laid that path for them to do what they're doing now. And I'm proud of it.
Very proud, and I agree. I think they're two separate things, I think.
Yeah. Ms. Martinez, do you your computer audio and then just listen to it on your phone and then you can talk? But just kind of use the video on your computer to actually see everybody else.
No, I did was I moved from my computer to my phone, so now I'm on my.
Okay. Okay. You had a point which leads into our next question, and that is, what lessons have you learned in the past that are relevant in the current situation with regard to race relations? So, what lessons have you learned in the past that are relevant today?
Well, I have learned that we can have allies, white allies, because before I didn't think that we could, based on how the environment that I came up in, and even here recently. And so I have been more accepting and glad that we have allies that will, continue to let people, understand what our plight is. We need those allies. And I also understand that we have to collaborate and do things together instead of trying to be these separate silos, because these silos don't help us at all. And we need support, and we need those allies. So that's what I have learned from what we did in the past, and what I've seen in the past, and what I'm doing now.
I think
I agree. Go, David.
I think that in the past we were looked at as an ignorant bunch of folks, but I think the relevancy in the current situation, all of them, white people don't look at us that way, because when we express ourselves, it's like we express ourselves with merit, and we come across as, hey, I'm not taking this anymore. I've grown past this. And I think this is most people that oppressed us in the past, I think they realize that now. And so they are more, I don't want to say more tolerant, but they're more acceptance of, us and where we're going.
I think one of the only other things that I would say, because I agree with both of the panelists, is that I feel that the women now feel they can really step out in front. We don't have to be behind some of our fellow men, that women can step out there and lead that way as well. And so what I'm seeing now are women coming up with the things that they need to do to move forward. Even here in Wichita, we have a young lady who is leading in a situation. So for me, it's looking back, and it's learning now that it's okay that a woman takes the lead, and I'm good with that.
I'll follow any day.
Uh-huh.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, this is Wakeela.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, what I've learned is that we as a people, Black people, who are in this movement, this current movement, need to help our white allies understand that we don't need for them to lead us. We need for them to partner and walk along with us. And that has been a reoccurring conversation that many of these young people who are leading these protests are saying, that they'll get their people together and rally up and everything else, and then as soon as their white allies come, they want to tell them how we go do this. And this is what we got to do. And then they stand in front, and then they, and everybody goes like, okay. So two things are happening, and I'm going to go back to that whole, gay piece, that this country, because we're still in that, we are the minority, still psychologically, and you look at the entire consciousness of this country, they become okay when they see their other white leaders marching along with us. And until that happens, there's no, I don't know if this is okay or not, but I hope that the allies that are coming along now understand that they don't need to tell us how to protest, how to create a movement, and how to get things happening, but that they just join us and that they're part of it as companions and as partners, not trying to tell us how to lead, the movement. And that's what I love about Black Lives Matter, that, they're so appreciative of anybody that comes along with them, but at the same time, they hold their base in terms of how it's so important for Black people to understand that we can lead, we can move, and we can make real changes in our lives. We just got to stay in the game. But it's good that we have the kind of support that we have now and agreement with our white allies. They are necessary, especially since we live in a, majority them country. So that was my intake on that one.
Thank you. Okay. What solutions would you all suggest to address systemic racism or institutional racism, such as police brutality?
That thing is so historical and in place that I have absolutely no resolution. I just don't believe that if you go into an organization with a conscious perspective that this is what you're doing, you're controlling, you're making sure everything is safe, and that I'm the police and I'm the end of the road. I had a conversation with one of those police supervisors on a scene, and I asked him in private. I said, "Now, when you leave your report in the morning before you go out into the street, I want you to you don't have to answer this question for me. I want you to ask yourself this question: are you going through the day with the attitude that you're here to protect and serve? Or are you going to the streets and saying, I'm going to make sure I make it home tonight, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to make it home, make sure I make it home tonight"? Which two of those dialogues happen in your mind before you hit the street? So, I don't know how long it's going to take for people to have a different perspective on how they do their job, but it's a control thing, and if it's not changed internally, prospectively, humanely, we're not going to see much of a difference.
I think there should be more intense training, not just for a month or so, but, 2 or 3 months of training and background check. I believe this is very important. If we apply for a job, they're going to check our background. And I think every police officer that puts in an application, they should have a background check. And the testing, I was thinking about, they should have a multiple choice type question to where each answer will identify their characters. And if they don't come up to a certain standard, then I don't think they should be a candidate to be a policeman.
You know, the only way we're going to get any kind of changes is to change the laws, and that's what one of them is the qualified immunity for police officers. I'm sorry, if you take a life purposely, like what happened to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, you should suffer the consequences. It shouldn't have to be any, you know, because the average Mary Deans and LaVonta Williams and Akeem, we would be arrested, tried, and jailed if we committed a crime like that has been committed against us. So police reform is one of the things that's going to change the mindset of some of these police officers when it comes to brutality, and also in the institutions. I worked at Boeing for a long time, and I was one of the lead plaintiffs when it came to the discrimination that blacks suffered inside of Boeing with lack of training, lack of promotions and all of that. Not only should there be an extensive diversity training, not just for 1 or 2 months, it should be year-round. It should be every day. Because we deal with systemic racism every day of our lives. And so how come they can't have the same kind of training and trained by people that have really suffered with the trauma of being discriminated with? That's who needs to be training them, not a big corporation that comes in and say, okay, we got a contract and we're going to come in here for 4 days out of this month and train you how to get along and how to have a diverse company. No. Have you suffered with that racism? Have you dealt with systemic racism in your life? No. People who have suffered with systemic racism should be the ones to teach those who do not know what systemic racism is all about.
Yeah, Ms. Dean, I have and not to get political at all, but I'm sure many of you thought-conscious folks that watched the debate last night, and your thoughts and views on it are one thing, and that's something totally different, so we won't debate that particular question here. But the president, however, did say and admitted to ending diversity training for police officers. That's one thing. The second thought, to follow what Ms. Dean was kind of saying and everyone else, is that I often hear that at one point, whites wore the KKK uniform, and today that uniform has been replaced by the police officer uniform. So just kind of those two thoughts and kind of get the panel discussion on that if we could.
Well, I think you did put a little bit different spin on it, but let me just kind of go forward with this. I definitely agree with the training and with the reform, and in some ways, I think across the country there has to be a certain rule. Will we or will we not have chokeholds? Will we or will we not see more knees on the throats of others? I think that there has to be some training that goes across the country that says this is not acceptable anymore. Right now here in Wichita, we have probably had the most diverse training classes than we've ever had. And it goes on now as we speak. More women, more Hispanic, more African American, and so all races need to still have some type of training. Having a son who's been on the force for quite a while, I realize that they continuously have to learn how to use their gun. They continuously have to go to a shooting range in order to make sure that they know how to shoot. Well, then they should continuously have those types of training dealing with diversity and ethnicity. Now, I know at one point this year, a group of us did go to the training center and we talked to that graduating class. We let them ask us questions. So you had pastors there, you had community groups there, but at least we got to tell that group of graduating police officers how we felt and let them ask us questions. So, Mary, you're right. they should be having that training from people from the community. And that would give them an insight as to where you're going and the community that you're going to serve. So I think that the training is continuous. It should not end once I step out of that training center and I am on the street. It has to be ongoing.
Yeah, I have one solution I'd like to actually put out there, and we began to talk about it at the Council of Elders, that the Black psychologist came up with a series of trainings for Black people, by Black people, for Black people, to deal with our emotional trauma that has occurred multi-generational as a result of the racism in this country. But they also have something that they've created called training for allies. And I'm suggesting to everybody here in Wichita that runs anything, that manages and has any influence over the lives of Black people, that we begin to look at their specialized training for our allies. And in this training, they actually educate about the lives of Black people and their emotional trauma around all of these events, historically and also presently. And so that would be something that I would like to suggest that they go through. But since I have no name for whoever's running this country, because I don't know who's running it. But since, there's going to be a set of people here who absolutely say, no, we ain't doing that, because they don't want to lose that level of control. But it's a real emotional shift that a human being has to make in order for them to see another person as a human and not as somebody who is less or minor of them because they don't have a status or whatever. And, let's talk about these institutions. Let's talk about, an example I wanted to bring to this conversation was, Department of Aging and how they care for these seniors and the services that people get. I don't know when it happened, but when you all split responsibilities there, and we got a whole set of different people who take care of our seniors who are in your program, they started getting less attention. I haven't seen a nurse. I haven't seen supplies for my mother that I used to see all the time. I don't have anybody checking in to see if everything's okay and if we need anything as a result of COVID. And when you look at the people, the home health people that are taking care of our community, that Department of Aging in some way, and their, grants and stuff are helping to make sure that we have home health to those who can't afford it. They send in your home. You can tell. The young, Caucasian girls, they don't want to be there. You can tell by the way they treat our people. And so, it's the whole institutional piece. I'm not trying to be really, really negative today, but I'm just telling you, this thing is so widespread that you just wonder if, in fact, we can ever come to the point to where we can have others believe that we are human beings who deserve compassion, who deserve care, who, by the way, pay their taxes all their life. And when it comes down to them getting any services, like my parents, they never got welfare. Never. And to this very day, my parents can get nothing because they're like $10, $20 over the recommended, poverty line or whatever, and they're always minus something. So I think that when you talk about institutional racism, it's a long, enduring, profound piece that I think is going to take time, but I just don't even see it because there's so many of them who have this really bad perspective about people of color. And I hear it, I see it, I feel it in every domain since I have returned to Wichita. And that was my experience. How do I, as a 30-year academician, at 2 international universities and 2 in the United States, Howard University being the premier state aid for Howard. Go to teach at WATC and sit there for 2 weeks and listen to racist students say horrible jokes in my face. And I endure it because I'm an educator who believes I can change your mind, because that's another training I do. Shifting, mindset shifting. And I got canned because those same students wrote a letter to the dean and said that I wasn't teaching from the book. You know, it's massive, people. It's like, oh my God. And you know what? I didn't leave there hurt, but I left there saying God sent me home to take care of my parents because that same year they allowed for guns on campus. So I'm sitting there in a class and I have a student who introduces himself and then begins to tell this joke that he loves, dark jokes, and says to this class, you want to hear a dark joke? And I've never heard that before in my whole life. He says, what is modern day extermination? And the answer is throwing Jew babies in a microwave. I sat there in my first class and heard this. Second class, he comes back with, oh yeah, what's on the internet today? Oh, this is a good one. What's the gourmet food for alligators? Nigger babies. I had to endure that. But you know what? I wasn't giving up on that human because I knew I could shift him. But the following week, I'm asked to leave the class because the students wrote a letter saying that I don't teach from the book. 30 years of doing this and training in Malaysia, embassy. I sit on the promotions and review board for the State Department for Foreign Service Officers. I was removed from that class. So this thing is so deep that it's like, do like this, do the dance, Wakeela, do the dance, do the dance. Stay out of the way. But tell your people, and my message to my children who they can't even believe the stuff that they're enduring because they lived in Washington and overseas most of their life. They can't even believe most of the stuff that happens in Wichita. It's embedded. And until the human changes, there's nothing that we can really see as a real shift and a change. But we have to be at the table, as former Councilwoman said. If you ain't at the table, you the meal, but at least be at the table so you can hear what they are doing, so that you can then go back to your village and create a way for them to understand what is happening and what we can actually gather from that and benefit from it. And I'm not trying to be a negative, but I'm just saying, I was part of the first Black movement. I'm 70. So, I was one of those people standing on 13th Street and all that chaos. I was one of the founders of the Black Panther movement in this town. I was also one of the founders of Black Student Union on Wichita State campus, and then floated around to all the other campuses and did the same thing. And now I'm here at 70, and I don't even see change on that campus. Come on, people. They got it deep for a lack of diversity in the entire country. So, what can we do? Y'all tell me what we can actually do to change the mentality of people. That man called for I didn't watch that stuff because I knew it was going to be crazy. I did important work. But I watched the assessments later on, and all that they could keep talking about was the fact that man made a call to the white supremacists, the Bucky Boys or whatever their name is, to get ready. And everybody heard it. And so if you go on their website today, you see that they're like, oh yeah, it's coming, we gonna do this. It's on. She rallied the people in front of the people.
Yeah. Ms. Martinez, very thought-provoking, and we really appreciate it. I think at this time now, just to give our audience a chance to hear some of their questions answered, we're going to turn it over to Dorsha and allow her to ask those questions.
Thank you so much, Hakeem. I've been kind of monitoring the chat, and so I'll just read some of the questions, starting with the first one that was submitted by Norvette, and it was, how can I get my 21-year-old daughter connected with positive groups that are involved in solutions for the current race situation going on in our nation? She is eager to make a difference, but she must be pointed in the right direction and continue to educate herself on history. Panel?
Church.
Right.
First
So, Pastor.
I'm just saying, hey, church, good Bible-believing, Bible-teaching church. That's the first step.
I will say that the Wichita branch NAACP is not just for Black people. The NAACP is for everybody because everybody has civil rights. And so she can definitely check with the NAACP here in Wichita.
I'm volunteer for Real Men, Real Heroes. Just get involved so that you know the people. There's lots of different organizations that one can actually rise up to youth. They can actually volunteer to work with those organizations that work with our youth.
And I'm president of an organization called Black Women Empowered in Wichita, Inc. And our mission is, our focus is Black women and not exclusively about mental health and how we can, empower Black women to love themselves. And so hit us up on Facebook. We got a Facebook page, Black Women Empowered in Wichita. Or you can inbox me and let me know how you would want to become an ally.
All right, thank you.
And maybe, Dorsha, we could get you our information, and maybe it could be available for you as well. NAACP is also on the website and Facebook.
Yes, I would appreciate if all of you would do that, and we'll definitely make that available. Thank you for that, Ms. Williams. On to the next question. We have several, so I'm going to kind of run through them, try to make sure we get to them all. From P. Olson, Paula, I believe Olson, to everyone. Do you believe that race relations today are worse, better, or about the same than compared to the 1960s, and why? Ms. Martinez, you spoke to this for a bit in your previous comments, but the questioner goes on to say, do you think that it's helpful or harmful that Black Lives Matter does not have any central doctrine or leadership like in the groups with the civil rights movement? And then finally, do you support the 1619 Project and having it taught in schools?
Yes to all. First one, the first one was
worse, better, race relations worse, better, or about the same than compared to the 1960s?
Well, old boy in the office right now in the People's House has allowed for this thing to become very transparent. We now know that race relations is worse because it's now open. They say what they want to say to you. They do what they want to do to you, and nothing you can do about it because I'm in charge. So I think that it's worse because now their feelings and emotions are very transparent because they're allowed. The second one was what
Do you think that it's helpful or harmful that Black Lives Matter doesn't have any central doctrine or leadership like in the groups with the civil rights movement?
So when you look at Black Lives Matter, and they don't have a need to have a controlling dogma because we're all different throughout the United States. It's a platform that you can use with some real guidelines. If you ever go on their website, it's really quite remarkable that if you start a Black Lives Matter in Wichita, it's going to look different than the Black Lives Matter, say, in Baltimore. The purpose and the vision will be different. So I'm glad they have that kind of broad leniency in terms of how to establish, but, you know, really focus on the issues that are at hand for you in your particular area. Wichita in Kansas is, you know, just different. So, and what's the third question?
Do you support the 1619 project, that training that Akeem was speaking to earlier that has been canceled, that President Trump discontinued? So do you support the 1619 project and having it taught in schools?
Oh, absolutely. If you don't know anything, the worst thing about prejudice and racism is truly about the ignorance of people, of the human. And 1619 can take care of that, especially with the younger generation, to open them up to the history of this thing so that they can stop seeing and listening. I saw a really good video when this whole movement first started with George Floyd, where all these, you know, all of a sudden the young white children were teaching their parents about their own bias and racism. Well, that's really biased of you. And I think that the more we do, we can have these generations coming up with a different level of consciousness. Because information is key to bashing and destroying those types of myths, you know, about a people.
Okay. Thank you much. Anyone else want to speak on that?
I just want to say that as far as the race relations, is it better or worse? I think it's worse because we have someone that's in the White House that has allowed, and it has not just did a dog whistle but a bullhorn and let people know that they can say and do anything that they want to people of color, period. As far as the 1619 project, because I'm not going to go into all of the questions, but the 1619 project, I think, is very essential when it comes to education because it would teach our children about self. We have learned the history of others all our lives in school, so we know their history, and a lot of the history is laced with lies and mistruths. And so I believe, and I've always believed that our history should be taught. And if they're not willing to teach it, then we have to teach it to our children ourselves.
Thank you. All right, on to our next question. I'm interested to hear opinions of how African Americans can deal with the psychological effects of being Black in America for generations and generations. I know to a certain extent this starts at home, but we all know equal opportunities to a middle class or upper class upbringing does not exist. What needs to be done to level the field with regards to equal education, equal employment, and equality in the justice system, and then how can we as a people finally overcome the injustices in America today?
Well, I think, let me start. That's a lot to unpack. I'm hearing a lot of this, but one of the things that I've observed is that even the young people, they don't understand how to teach our children. And so, you know, that's a huge problem. And like I said before, the Black Psychologists Association came up with something called Emotional Emancipation Circles. And the Council of Elders did the first one here to certify other people that would actually serve the Black community. It is psychology body and how they feel about themselves once you learn what has happened psychologically to you, emotionally, and the trauma of racism, even as it exists today, is very, very good. It's very effective. But we also have on the other side of that, like I said before, an allied training for people who have to, in any way, deal with the African American community here. But when you look at it across the board, now, do you need to do that with allies in Baltimore? No. They know their history. And so, therefore, the emotional trauma is quite different. It's still racism, but it's also economics and other things. And so it's a very good training. I think that's one of the things I would definitely promote for communities. They are supposed to be free. But you have to create a way to pay for the trainers to do the training itself.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Darcia, I think the training has to start at home first. Parents have to get involved and stay involved with their children, pushing them to the limit. And once they get to college, they should take courses that will influence or enhance what they've learned at home and get a better grip on who they are and what they're all about. And from there, they can relate to prejudice, racism, or whatever, because, love has been instilled in their heart. And, love covers a multitude of sins.
Amen. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question from Mr. Martin Toland. What advice would you give each of us, individually and collectively, to be part of the solution to end racism in our communities and our country? No pressure. Small question.
I would definitely say get involved. I think that's one of the best ways to understand each other and communicate with each other and educate with each other. I just put on the chat just a while ago. We're working on registering voters right now. Find out who's out there registering voters, and then get out there and work, and then you're going to be close enough to be able to have that conversation. My main thing is to get involved and get out there and make yourself visible and let people know that you're ready to help work in their and on their behalf.
I have found in my later years being in an organization that it's good to collaborate with other organizations. Some of them, some may have the same mission as yours, some may not. It's just like Black Women Empowered, which are Inc. We're partnering with the League of Women Voters, and we have been for the last 3 weeks. And we to register people to vote on the drive-throughs with Maggie Thompson. We're going to partner with them again October the 8th at Atwater to register people to vote. And so it's about collaboration with organizations. And as I said earlier, come out of these silos, because we're in too many silos. And once you collaborate and come together, you can reach a broader audience of people to get your message across.
All right.
The collaboration is.
We'll be registering people this weekend.
Yep. Well, I would say this to you all individually, to take a look and ask yourself your own questions. What am I willing to do to help heal what is happening in my own family? And start with your families first, and then move it beyond, because until we come out of this trauma that our community has suffered over so many years, just look at our village and what's happened to it. And people don't even understand the trauma alone that happened to homeowners with the polls. And it's like, okay, do you talk to your people? Can you give each other confidence? Can you look at this one child that everybody says something negative about and go like, you're the most lovely, wonderful thing that ever happened? Look, what you're doing in school. You know, it used to be that you couldn't see your grandma, couldn't see anybody in your family without somebody saying, so what's happening in school? What's your grades look like? Okay, you bring A home and you got $20. But it's like we don't have that bond loving extended family thing going on because of so many dynamics. So we got to hold our families in such a way that we can begin to heal within so that we can then go out and be healthy people who will take a stand for our rights no matter what. You know, you're going to speak up when somebody says something that, what? Did you really say that? You believe that? Okay. You know what I'm saying? That's what I would say to you all. It is about love, but, you know, until we handle what's not working within our own family nucleus and encourage our people to be, you know, courageous and heroes within, then what can we do on the outside? Let's struggle.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, moving on to the next question. From, I think, Norvette. We keep hearing the word training for officers over and over. But my question is, how do you train someone not to look at me, a black man, as not a threat? I have been black my whole life, and they have been trained to be racist their whole life. So how does that change?
Well, y'all know what I said. Hey, that's deeply embedded psychologically, and I don't know anything else but what Mary Dean said. Somebody need to go to jail, which was always my premise about all the children in the foster care system that got lost, still lost, that whoever was in charge of that decision needed to go to jail. But because these are black children or poor children or parents who are like, you know, the so-called out people, those children were treated like they were insignificant because they were like nobody's child. The law has to change, and people need to be they need to be outed, but also they need to learn to take responsibility for what they are not doing when it comes to taking a job and supposed to be providing services. They need to go. You know, that's all I can say about that subject. Because it's not just, people aren't going to change like that.
There was a report by the FBI, and it was released several years ago, that said that the Ku Klux Klan have infiltrated the police department. So, every once in a while I see something on a news flash that says this person has changed their thoughts on how they view black people that was in a former Ku Klux Klan member and all of that kind of stuff. You know, I don't know. Is that true? The person that asked that question about how do you change how they look at us or look at you as a black man, I think because it's been so ingrained in them that I don't think there is a change. And the only change that I would see that will help them view you as a human being is to get rid of that qualified immunity and change the law. If they have to suffer the consequences of what they have done in racial profiling and murdering an innocent black man or woman, they have to do jail time, lose everything that they have, that's going to be the only way that they are going to realize that I got to do something different. It hurts when it comes from the pocket, when you hit them in the pocket, and you have to do changes when it comes to law. All this, you know, I believe in loving people too, and I think because in our how we were trained up when it came to religion has really abandoned black people when it came to how we look at the people that are harming us. turn your cheek, you know, these cheeks and these cheeks down here, love your enemies. That has harmed us. And so, I'm sorry, I'm a realist, and I have to say that we have to learn to love ourselves and not be enslaved in being a slave any longer, thinking like a slave, that we are powerful, great people, and where we came from are from kings and queens, and we were not enslaved. Our people were not enslaved when they came to this country. They were kings and queens, and they came over here and they were enslaved. So that's what people need to understand. And so until the laws are changed, and until somebody hurts when it comes to how they view you as a black man, they still gonna have that ingrained hatred.
So what I hear you saying is that you may not be able to change their attitude, but if you change the laws, you may be able to change their behavior and how they act on those attitudes.
Absolutely.
Pastor David, were you?
But I also think that we start younger. We probably can't change that person, that police officer right now. But if we start younger and working with our kids at a younger age, we can make a difference. And we're right, because there's so many things that are instilled in our heads. I'm sure just like some of us on this panel, I was told I came from a zip code area where I would not succeed. I was told this, I was told that. We were told so many things by so many other people. But you have to start young in understanding exactly what is going on. And you really can't let somebody else describe how you will react or how you will be once you're older. But when we have that 25-year-old police officer now that gets out on the street, hopefully somewhere down the line, somebody has helped them to understand the differences and to like the differences that we have in our community. It's awfully hard to teach that old dog new tricks.
So, you know, for me, when you say we have to train them up young, are you talking about our people training them up young, or the opposite?
I think I'm talking about all of it. We do talk to our kids. We talk to our kids at a younger age and telling them how not to get hurt out on the street. But we have to somehow have those conversations at a young age, race conversations at a young age, ethnicity at a young age, so that if they grow up hearing all of these differences and the stories, not exactly the stories, but the truth that have happened, you know, it's just like we keep saying we need some type of Black history in our schools. We don't have that, so we take February and try to cram everything into it, and you can't do that. So at least learning a little bit every day so that you don't just get up there and all of a sudden you're a 25-year-old police officer and all maybe your parents have talked to you about is black this and black that, and black doesn't matter. So I think we have to start at an age in helping that young white child understand the difference as well as talking to our own kids.
I'm going to let Pastor David speak, and then we're almost out of time, and so we'll go to Annette for our close. But Pastor David, go ahead and give your thoughts on that.
I was thinking about there has to be dialogue, and just to say what LaVonta was saying about talking to different people. I remember at work, well, when I was working, I'm retired now, but I had a young lady that didn't want to, my supervisor was on vacation, so I was left in charge. And the young lady didn't want to follow orders. She didn't want to do anything. And so I pulled in the office. I said, hey, what's the problem? And she told me that she was brought up not to say yes, sir, not to say no, ma'am, to any black. It's like disregarding. She was brought up in a little small country town But it was ingrained in her. And I told her, I said, hey, I'm just here taking my supervisor's position while he's on vacation. I'm not trying to make you do anything, but you must follow orders. So she, it sunk in. But there has to be dialogue. Hey, there's all kind of racism and prejudices, but there must be dialogue. You have to take the initiative a lot of times to tell a person, hey, you're prejudiced, you're racist. But in the end, if they have an ear to hear, it'll sink in. And, we just have to do it. We have to be bold enough to approach our enemies, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you so much, Hakeem. You did a wonderful job as moderator. I want to thank all those who are here today, and then turn it over to our Executive Director, Annette Graham, for some final remarks.
Okay, and I will just echo what Dorsha said. Thank you so much for all the panelists for participating today, for agreeing to be a part of this, and to Hakeem for facilitating it. And thank you to Dorsha Crooksey for putting this together and coordinating this excellent event. We did have a very large participation from across the community, even a few from outside of our area. So I just want to thank all the people that participated. As we talked about this initially, we knew that it was important to provide a platform for older adults to be able to have this discussion. So it is, we are honored to have the panelists to participate on this and to share their wisdom, their experiences, their recommendations, and their guidance. We are at as we all know, a very critical point in our society. There are a lot of things on the line, and there's a lot of things happening. But we really, working with older adults, knew that there was so much experience, so much knowledge that needs to be shared, and we are honored to be able to provide this platform. These are not always easy discussions. There are difficult topics, but really appreciate everybody involved. And I said we are glad that we had this opportunity to elevate your voices, because as we as a community and society move forward, this is important information, and it's important to make progress and improve based on, and we have to have that understanding and that knowledge and to share that widely. Saying that, I did want to let you know that this has all been recorded. We will be sharing this on our website, and we'll be sharing it on Facebook, because this is important information to get out there and to share with others, because there's a lot of ideas and information that was shared today that's very critical. Again, I just want to thank everybody, especially thanks to the panelists for sharing what you have shared today, for engaging in this dialogue, for answering these questions, and to help provide information to help us as a community and all of us to become more engaged, to become allies, to work on that education, and to take a stand. So thank you so much. It has been our honor and pleasure to host this today.
With that, I'll say thank you to each of you, and we will go ahead and close the meeting. But panelists, I am going to take a copy of all of the comments in the chat, and there was one question we were unable to get to, so I may be contacting you for your thoughts on those questions. Again, thank you to all of you for being here today for this most important conversation, and we hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorsha. Thank you. Good to see you, Hakeem.